I wanted to talk to you about the Star Trek Picard novel Firewall by David Mack. Welcome to the Sound and Fury YouTube channel. My name is Eric Wilfred Watson. I am the author of Becoming Quincy and Judas Kissed. Both of those thriller novels are available on Amazon.com now. I just finished reading the new David Mack Star Trek novel, Firewall, and I wanted to give you my thoughts. I'm a lifelong Trekkie. I've read many Star Trek novels, and David Mack has a reputation of writing very good books. I've read a number of his Star Trek novels. Most of them are quite good, and this one is no exception. It's rather good, but there are a few nitpicks, a few things that I wish were different. But overall, it was quite an enjoyable read. If you like Star Trek books, this is a good one. It's a standalone story. You don't need to know a lot about Star Trek to read this book, but it does help if you've watched Star Trek Picard. But even if you haven't, if you know who Seven of Nine is, even in passing, the book will make sense to you. And even if you don't, you could just pick this book up not knowing anything about Star Trek whatsoever, and it will still read fairly well. The things that I like about the book. Number one, you really get into the Fenris Rangers, which are mentioned in Star Trek Picard, but are never seen outside of that show. They weren't in the classic Trek shows. The organization was mentioned only in Star Trek Picard. So, it's a new piece of world building. It's an expansion of the Star Trek universe, and it's quite fun to read about that organization, which reminds me an awful lot of the Maquis. The Fenris Rangers have to police an area where the Federation has largely abandoned, and they are misunderstood. They're thought of as vigilantes, but really they seem to care about justice. When Seven of Nine had the gut shot of being denied her citizenship and denied her entrance into Starfleet, despite Captain Janeway's recommendation, she goes off and joins the Fenris Rangers. The story revolves around her infiltrating that organization first as an agent of a Federation security service, but it turns out there's a lot more going on than meets the eye. The person that recruited her to spy on the Fenris Rangers, and there's a lot more going on with the Fenris Rangers themselves. The story does have an anti-war element where unilateral action that seems justified can lead to unintended consequences, which is a parallel to the real world where certain military actions can have unintended consequences. I did like that aspect of it. Star Trek at its best does allegories of modern day situations, and this book does that as well. Seven of Nine is a character that was first established on the Voyager television show, but modern Star Trek has retconned her sexuality to being somebody who is attracted to the same sex, which is fine. I'm absolutely fine with that sort of representation in Star Trek. However, it seems like the author didn't quite know how to handle that. They have her engaged in hookups, which seem very out of character. They have her engaged in certain romances, which you know ahead of time won't go anywhere because she ends up in other relationships in the TV show Picard. So it's hard to get invested in a romance that you know isn't actually going to work out. But despite its minor flaws, it is a quite good Star Trek novel. It's nice to see that the new continuity of Star Trek novels is starting to pick up after the old continuity ended with the Coda novels. It looks promising for the future. I look forward to more Star Trek novels that are set in this continuity. Aside from Seven of Nine seeming to act a little bit out of character early in the novel, it really does her character justice overall throughout the course of the story. You understand her motivations, and you understand the motivations of the side characters. A lot of characters are new that are not characters that you've seen on screen, but the characters that you have seen on screen that are mentioned, such as Captain, or shall I say Admiral Janeway, are handled and written well. You feel that the people you're reading about are the people you saw on the show. With that being said, I highly recommend this novel. It's one of the better Star Trek novels out there, despite a few minor missteps.